Today's best music.
Magic 89.9.
Well, I think for it really started from me. Like, my dad is such a big figure. Like,
sounds like it, yeah.
He's physically tall, but
Not
aside from that, like, he's like 6 foot something, 6 foot or 4.
Wow,
But aside from
okay.
that, in terms of personality, he just has such a big personality.
And big influence on you, I assume?
Huge.
Okay.
Huge influence
Yeah.
in a very different way.
Okay.
Like, he was in the French Navy, very, very, very poor family from the west of France.
Mhm.
French Navy, because his brothers, so my grandparents gave him the choice, either you're going to be a priest or you're going to be in the Navy.
Mhm.
And so he was one of the sons to be chosen to go to the Navy at 16.
Okay.
So he was in the Navy for a couple of years, and then after that he became a geothermal. Basically, they would send these people out into the fields in places where there was nothing. So we're talking about Borneo in the 60s,
Okay.
Labrador in Canada in the 70s.
I can picture.
Like,
right. Okay.
absolutely
Right.
nothing.
Right.
Places in Africa where his house was literally surrounded by baboons. And he was the only person there, and he would get his supplies by airdrops. And so you grow up with all these very colorful, big, inspiring stories of adventure. Something that in our day and age, we don't really hear about anymore,
Right,
because
right.
a lot of what we do is online and on phones and all these
Right,
things, right?
Right.
So I knew from a very young age, I was like, I need, quote unquote, my own adventure. Like, how do I make this happen for myself?
Mm.
You know, I grew up very not wanting for anything, and I'm very grateful for that. Like, I had a really, really good childhood. And then, so I grew up in the Philippines, high school there, and then I went to college in Paris. And then after college in Paris, you know, there were job offers left, right, and center. And my French peers were basically all complaining. They're like, oh, you know, like being really spoiled, saying things like,
Really?
oh,
Yeah.
I can't get the managerial position I want, and all these
Right.
things. And I
Right.
grew up with that mentality of, you got to earn your keep, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so I didn't expect to get a big job right off the bat.
Not entitled. In other words, to use the word.
Exactly,
You
yeah.
don't want to be entitled. Okay.
And so understanding that during college, so we had 6 months in France. It was a very kind of like intense program where we only had school for 6 months. And then for 6 months, you could either take a vacation or get a job. And so each time I had the opportunity to, I would just randomly email hotels around the world and say, hey, do you guys need anyone for 6 months? Like, not necessarily an internship, but what they call a saisonnier, a seasonal worker.
Okay.
Because it was a 6 months period. So I ended up going to Shanghai for 6 months, where I worked as basically a banquet waiter,
Okay.
dishwasher. I helped
Same
fix,
here.
like,
Okay.
air cons and stuff like that.
You fixed some air cons too. So you did that too. Okay.
Multiple hats.
Okay.
And then I was living in a dormitory with Chinese people from, you know, far-flung villages that didn't have homes in Shanghai. So,
right.
yeah, so we were like 24 people in a dorm room with complete strangers. I had a small high school American locker for all my stuff to fit into, communal showers, things like that, like real life. So I did that for 6 months, came back to Paris for another 6 months. And then after that, I went to Vietnam for 6 months, where I was for 6 months the assistant to the F&B manager there of one of the biggest hotels in Hanoi. And then after that, I came back to Paris. And then that summer for 6 months, I decided to stay in Paris. I took care of banquets again and events, organizing them in a hotel in Paris. And then before I graduated, I lived in Greece for 6 months. And there it was a huge resort. And I was they called it the conflict resolution manager. So basically I took care of any guest complaints.
Yeah, it's
pretty
like
much.
PR. Yeah.
Any guest complaints, but also any internal employee fights and complaints and stuff like that.
Okay. Oh, okay. Wow. Okay.
And then after graduating, so yeah, everyone was saying, oh, I feel like I should be the general manager of whatever. And I was like, and so they were all complaining about not getting jobs that were paid and everything. And I was like, you know what? Like, the one thing I learned from my dad is to go for things that other people aren't going for. So
there's less demand for it. Is that what
exactly.
it is? More space for you.
So I started looking for jobs in Nigeria, Iraq, Iran, Africa.
Wow, Iraq and Iran too, huh?
I was looking for jobs in Venezuela. Thank God I didn't go there. Just various places. And
Russia.
then,
Didn't you go to Russia too? At
yes,
some
so
point?
a couple of them replied, and then the best
Okay.
offer financially was Russia.
Okay.
And this was further east than Siberia. So
Okay.
I usually call it far eastern Siberia, but it's really just the most eastern part of Russia.
Right.
And it was a small island called Sakhalin with 200,000 people. They were only famous for shooting down a Korean airplane once in the 80s. Basically, during World War II, that's where they sent all their war prisoners. We're talking about Soviet Russia here, so USSR.
Yeah, right. Right.
So basically, the people they would send into prisons were homosexuals, artists, descendants, people who were against the government in general. So they sent all these people into these gulags,
In that section,
but also really bad people like prisoners and whatnot. So it's a very tough place, like with a very tough history. So when
I hope the money was worth. I hope the money was worth it. Yeah.
So I looked at the salary. I'm just like, why is this so big for a new grad? And why does no one want this job?
High risk, high return, huh?
So the CEO from the company, which was Sodexo, was in Paris at the time, and he emailed me and he said, "You want to have coffee?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." So we had coffee, and he kind of explained to me the job. He said, I'd be in charge of 40 people. Running all the operations of all the catering, coffee shop, bars, clubs, and oil rig food operations, so dispatch food for Eastern Russia. And I was like, that's huge for a 21-year-old. Like, that's absolutely massive. Right. And so after the coffee, I remember I told him, I'm like, game, let's do it. And then I went home, I went on Google, and I typed in the word Sakhalin. And then I had a little mini heart attack. And I was like, I accepted this. And, I think a lot of people would have backtracked at that point. And I was like, you know what? This is what I wanted. I wanted this comfort, this fear of the unknown, this big adventure. Like, this is my adventure. And so I went there for 2 years.
Didn't you want to Google them first before accept the job? Isn't that supposed to be the? But
I feel like at that age, I think that's the thing with a lot of people out of college or young people is we have way too much expectations for ourselves. I believe I wanted to get my ass beaten. You know what I mean? Like, okay. Make me mop the floors. Spurs. Yeah, exactly. Right. And then so I went there, and then I realized from day one, this is going to be an adventure. Like, we landed, it was icy. It was 6 months. 6 months of the year is winter, and 6 months of the year is weather. Right. Tiny airport, the most rudest immigration officers I ever met in my life. And in that area, the most xenophobic people I've ever met. Like, just because I was French and I looked different, people didn't like me right off the bat. I'd walk down the street, in my 2 years there, I got jumped twice on the street for absolutely no reason. Like, maybe just the way you look. I would have been happy if they took my wallet or if they took my phone.
Oh, okay. So they just beat you up for
literally, they tap me on the shoulder and they go, "Hey, you want to go?" And you're just like, "What?" And then it just breaks out. Right. And so that was the kind of place. And then out of the 40 people that I was managing at the time, I can guarantee you when I started, everyone hated me because I was younger than everyone. I was younger than all my quote unquote. Right? Exactly. I was younger than all my employees. And the reason why they wanted to bring young blood is because it was a business for the last 10 years that was losing money. So my job was to try to get that to zero, to break it even. They didn't even expect me to make
at the very least, right?
They said, just break even. Let's see if it's possible. Right. You're kind of our last
resort
draw. Yeah, before deciding whether or not we're going to close shop here. I was like, wow, thanks. You should have said that during the interview.
And a lot of things should have happened before the interview.
And so I had to deal with people who just wanted nothing to do with me. And there were people that had been there for 10 years that thought they could do the job much better than me. Right. And so they had this young kid coming in telling them what to do, and not a lot of them liked it. I wouldn't be surprised if those are some of the people that beat me up.
You just didn't recognize them.
Exactly. And then, so after that...
It was a dark alley. I didn't see them. So, yeah.
After that, which was really interesting, so they call it a hardship rotation. So basically you work every day like no one counts the hours. There's no clocking in or clocking out. You work every day, as long as you can. It was usually 16 to 18 hours a day. Get really drunk on vodka at night, do it all over again. And you do this for 90 days straight. And then you get 1 month off.
Okay.
So basically I did this 90-day, 30-day rotation.
1 month, yeah, the 90-day again. For how long?
For 2 years.
Wow.
And so every time during that 1 month, I'd either travel or come back to the Philippines and stuff like that. So
and
a lot
physically recover.
And yeah, and that's the thing you realize, like I was the youngest expat there as well. And so I had lost the ability to talk about anything else than the weather. Like, cause I was talking to guys who were 50, having a beer from Arkansas in the US, like very strange people, like very strange profiles. Like this was an oil rigging town. So these are like oil folk.
Wow.
And so very hard people. And then so I forgot how to converse with young people my age. And so I'd come back and completely decompress. And then that's where I started kind of like writing a blog online.
Your
and that's
blog,
So that's how I started writing The Fat Kid Inside.